Eli's arms were already numb when the third car swerved around him, high beams flooding the highway and washing over the broken girl in his arms like she wasn't even there. Blood soaked through his hoodie, sticking her to his chest, every step sending a white-hot knife up his spine. Drivers hit the gas, not the brakes, choosing their warm beds over a bleeding child and a homeless boy who didn't belong anywhere. He thought the worst thing that could happen tonight was losing her on that empty road. He had no idea whose daughter he was carrying. Welcome to the Echo Tales family, where stories of the forgotten and the brave collide on dark roads and change lives in ways no one sees coming. If you're just joining in, stay close, because this story is going to reach places in your heart you didn't know were still aching. To everyone who's been walking with this channel from the start, may God pour strength and unexpected joy into your life. Before we step deeper into this night, let's pause together. Heavenly Father, we lift up every person listening to this story. Watch over them and their families. Heal what's broken, meet every need they're too tired to even speak about, and cover them with a peace that doesn't make sense compared to what they're facing. Let your presence sit in the room with them as they listen, and remind them they are not unseen, and not alone. In Jesus' mighty name, Amen. Now, lean in. What you're about to hear is not just about flashing lights and roaring engines. It's about a homeless boy who chose pain over comfort, fear over safety, and miles of cold pavement under his feet, just to keep one injured girl breathing when the whole world kept driving by. Eli's arms burned long before they started to shake. At first it was just heat, a slow, spreading fire across his shoulders as he climbed out of the ditch with the girl in his arms. Then the fire turned to knives. Every step sent a blade up his spine, grinding between his vertebrae, daring him to drop her. The highway stretched ahead in a narrow river of cracked asphalt, two faded yellow lines cutting through a sea of black fields and thicker black trees. No houses. No porch lights. No soft glow of a town waiting to catch them. Only the occasional distant hiss of engines and the cold, uncaring stars watching from above. Her blood soaked through his hoodie in a steady, sticky warmth that had already turned cold by the time it reached his skin. Her cheek pressed against his chest, too light and too heavy at the same time, like he was carrying smoke that had learned how to bleed. She made a small sound when his boot slipped on loose gravel, not a full cry, not even a whimper. Just a broken inhale that said her body hurt more than she knew how to explain. If you're following along and feeling the tension already, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment to tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. Stories like this are meant to be felt together, even when they start in the darkest places. Eli tightened his grip around the girl and forced his legs back into motion. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she'd been going when the car hit the guardrail and went nose first into the ditch like the world had decided to swallow it whole. He only knew three things: she was young, she was hurt, and if he left her there, no one else was coming in time. The system had taught him that much. He could still hear the crash if he let his mind go quiet for even a second. The clean hum of an engine becoming a scream of tires. Metal shrieking against metal. Glass exploding into the night like shrapnel made of stars. Then the wet, wrong thud of the car hitting bottom. After that came the silence, the thick, stunned kind that falls after a punch. The kind he knew too well from shelters and group homes, the moment when everyone decides whether they're going to pretend they didn't see anything. He'd stood on the shoulder, hands buried in the pockets of his torn hoodie, heart pounding so hard it hurt his teeth. Every instinct he'd learned on the street screamed at him to walk away. Crashes meant sirens. Sirens meant cops. Cops meant questions. And questions meant files, systems, adults who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes, asking where he belonged like he'd ever belonged anywhere. Walk away, the old voice in his head had whispered. This isn't yours. Don't give them a reason to notice you. Then he'd heard her. Not a scream. Screams were easy. Screams sounded like someone who still believed the world might answer. This was smaller. A strangled, broken sound trying not to be heard. Like pain that had learned it was safer to stay quiet. It came from the ditch, somewhere beyond the twisted shape of the car, somewhere in the tangle of weeds and shattered glass. That sound went past every shut door, every moved-on social worker, every night he'd spent pretending he didn't care about anyone but himself. It grabbed something in his chest he thought the streets had already killed and dragged it back to life. His feet moved before his brain let them. Now, on the road, his boots slapped the cracked asphalt in a rhythm his body tried to turn into a routine. Step, breathe. Step, breathe. The girl, Emily, he decided, because she needed something better than, hey, or, kid, in his head, twitched in his arms. One leg was bent wrong, limp and weightless. Her hair stuck to his hoodie in clumps, tacky with blood at the temple he refused to look at for too long. Don't drop me, she rasped against his chest. Her voice was raw, sanded down by shock and fear. Her fingers clawed weakly into the fabric at the back of his neck, small and trembling and desperate. That one sentence weighed more than her whole body. I won't, Eli said, though his throat felt tight and dry. I've got you. He didn't know where the words came from. Nobody had ever said them to him and stayed. But once they were out, they hung between them like a promise he couldn't take back. Headlights appeared in the distance, low and growing. Eli shifted his weight toward the center line, heart leaping in his chest. Maybe this one will stop. Maybe someone will finally see them. The car's engine grew louder, a smooth, expensive purr that didn't match the broken bones and blood-soaked hoodie in its path. Eli raised one arm as high as he dared without losing his grip on Emily. Hey, he shouted. Hey, please. For a heartbeat, the lights dimmed just enough to feel like hope. Then they flared brighter, high beams, full and blinding. The car slid into the opposite lane with casual ease, giving them plenty of space. Eli saw the driver's face for half a second, clean shirt, clean shave, eyes wide and then narrowing like a problem had just been successfully avoided. The car passed. Wind slapped Eli's hoodie against his ribs. Taillights shrank into the dark. Behind him, Emily made a sound that wasn't quite a sob. More like something inside her had cracked. They're not stopping, she whispered. He swallowed hard, jaw clenching until his teeth hurt. Another engine. Another pair of headlights. A truck this time, rumbling low, horn giving a single irritated blast as it swung around them. Gravel spat against Eli's legs. Emily flinched, her whole body tensing like she expected the impact that never came. Hold on, he said, voice rough. We're gonna find the lights, okay? Gas station, something. Just, hold on. The road answered with more quiet, more cold. Pain gnawed up his spine, into the base of his skull. His fingers had stopped feeling like fingers, they were claws locked around her waist, refusing to let go. For a moment, the yellow line beneath his boots blurred and doubled. He blinked hard, forcing it back into one. This wasn't the first time the world had decided not to see him. He remembered sleeping behind a grocery store dumpster at 12, listening to shoppers complain about the weather while he tried to keep his toes from going numb. He remembered a social worker promising, "This one's different, Eli. These people really care," right before another placement where he was a problem to manage, not a person to love. He remembered hands on his shoulders, turning him away from doors, from rooms, from families who'd decided he was too angry, too quiet, too much work. If the world could ignore kids like him in bright daylight, why would it stop for him now, blood-spattered and shaking in the dark? Because of her, he thought. It should stop because of her. Emily's breath fluttered unevenly against his chest. Too shallow. Too fast. Every time her chest hitched, panic stabbed him sharper than his own pain. "You with me?" he asked, not daring to look down at her face. "Cold," she whispered. "I'm so cold." He shifted her higher in his arms, biting back a groan as his back screamed in protest. The motion sent another bolt of fire down his legs. His vision dimmed at the edges for a second, shrinking the world to the sound of their breathing and the distant drone of an engine that wasn't getting any closer. "Yeah," he said, forcing the word out. "Me too." Somewhere far ahead, the faintest hint of light bled into the sky. Not stars. Not lightning. A smear of dull orange, low and steady. A gas station, maybe. A truck stop. Civilization. The idea of people who might have blankets and phones and hands that didn't flinch away from blood. He fixed his eyes on that glow like it was the only thing keeping his legs moving. "You got family?" he asked quietly, more to keep her awake than because he needed the answer. "My dad," she breathed. He's gonna be so mad." Eli's lips twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Yeah. Bet he'll be more mad at the road than at you." You don't know him," she murmured, voice fraying at the edges. "Don't need to," Eli said. "You're his kid. That's enough." She shivered, fingers twitching against his neck. Somewhere under the fear and pain, there was something else in her voice when she spoke again. He doesn't let people hurt me." "Guess we're on the same page tonight then," Eli said softly. He didn't know that the man she meant wasn't the kind who called 911 and waited in the living room. He didn't know her father's name, didn't know what kind of engines his friends rode or how fast news traveled when one of their own went missing. He had no idea that miles away, a phone would soon ring in a crowded clubhouse, and everything would go quiet when a name and a crash hit the air. All he knew was that the light ahead still looked too far, and his body was running out of time. He took another step. His knee buckled. The world tilted hard. For a split second, he felt Emily's weight pull away from his center of balance like gravity had decided she belonged to the asphalt, not his arms. His boot hit a patch of loose gravel at the edge of the shoulder. The ground dropped out beneath him. "Sorry," he gasped, the word ripping from his throat as his leg gave. The night rushed up at them. Emily's fingers tightened in his hoodie. Her mouth opened in a sound that was half cry, half broken breath. Blood-slick fabric slid under his hands. His shoulder pitched forward, carrying both of them toward the unforgiving black of the road. And in the same heartbeat, somewhere in the distance, an engine roared to life, louder, closer, and nothing like the cars that had been pretending not to see them. Eli didn't feel the impact at first. There was the slip, the sickening lurch as his boot lost grip on the gravel. Then the world tilted, the sky dropping and the road lunging up to meet them. For a heartbeat, he and Emily hung in a horrible, weightless moment where he knew he couldn't save both of them from the fall. He twisted anyway. His shoulder hit first, slamming into the asphalt with a crack that lit his nerves on fire. The shock tore a hoarse sound from his throat, half gasp, half growl. Emily rolled against his chest, her injured leg jolting, her head snapping sideways. The scream that didn't make it out of her mouth shuddered through her whole body instead, a silent quake that drove straight into his bones. For a second, all he could hear was the roar of blood in his ears. Cold seeped up from the road, numbing his cheek. The air smelled like burned rubber, old oil, and iron, his own blood or hers, he couldn't tell. Stars stretched overhead, blurred and distant, like a world that had already accepted they might not stand up again. Emily's breath stuttered against his collarbone. Eli, it was barely a word. More like a thought that got lost on the way out. His name on her lips did what pain couldn't, it cut through the static. He dragged in a breath that scraped his lungs raw and forced his arm to move. His fingers fumbled for a hold on her, palms skating over ripped fabric and sticky warmth. Every muscle screamed in protest, but he got his hand under her shoulders, the other under her back, pulling her closer, shielding her from the cold hardness of the asphalt. "I've got you," he rasped. His voice sounded wrong, too far away, but the words were steady. He pushed himself up onto his side, then his knees. His shoulder burned like someone had driven a nail through it, but he locked his jaw and rode the pain instead of letting it ride him. Emily's face was pale, lips tinged gray in the starlight. Blood had dried in a dark crust at her hairline, tracing a jagged path down her temple. Her eyes flickered, pupils blown wide, trying to find him. "Hurts," she whispered. "I know." He swallowed hard. "I know it does." He wanted to say more. Wanted to tell her that it wasn't fair, that none of this should have been hers to carry, that the world was supposed to break itself before it let a kid end up on a road like this. But the words jammed in his throat like broken glass. So he did the only thing he knew how to do, he moved. Slowly, carefully, he slid his arms under her again. His right shoulder throbbed in hot, pulsing waves. His fingers felt thick and clumsy, like they didn't belong to him. He shifted her weight, trying to keep her leg as still as possible. The moment her body left the road, a ragged sound tore from her chest and her hands locked onto his hoodie, nails digging into his skin through the fabric. "Don't," she choked. "Don't leave me." "I'm not," he said, the words coming out harsher than he meant. He softened them with the next breath. "I'm not going anywhere." He forced his legs under him. The first attempt, his knee buckled and slammed back into the asphalt, sending a shockwave of pain up his thigh. He tasted metal, realized he'd bitten his tongue. The second attempt, he dug his heel into the rough shoulder of the road and pushed like the ground itself was trying to throw him back down. His body trembled with the strain. Muscles quivered like overworked wires about to snap. He got upright anyway. The night pressed in close, heavy, and thick. The distant smear of light on the horizon, those possible gas station lamps, looked farther away than before, a faint bruise against the black sky. Behind them, the ditch was a dark mouth clutching the twisted wreck. The car's hazard lights blinked weakly. Red. Orange. Red. Orange. Like a dying heartbeat trying to pretend everything was fine. The occasional grind of metal settling carried on the wind, a low groan that sounded almost human. Eli didn't let himself look at it for more than a second. If he did, he'd see the spot where he'd found her, half in the grass, half on the crushed gravel, one shoe gone, hair tangled with glass. He'd see the way her eyes had latched onto his like he was the last possible answer to a question she was too scared to ask out loud. He turned away from the wreck and started walking. Each step was an argument with gravity. The road felt steeper than before, the incline subtle but cruel. The weight in his arms hadn't changed, but his body had. The fall had stolen something, some reserve of strength he hadn't known he was relying on. His breath came in shorter bursts now, each inhale dragging cold air over lungs that already burned. Emily's fingers moved again, searching for something. He realized she was feeling for the pulse in his neck. "I'm still here," he said, his voice a low, rough thread. She pressed her forehead against his chest. Her breath came out in shallow puffs that barely warmed his skin. "Dad's gonna lose it," she muttered, words slurring at the edges. "Good," Eli said. "He can yell at the road when we're not on it." A tiny, broken laugh shivered out of her, then faded into a wince. She didn't know that miles away, a phone lay on a bedside table beside a leather jacket and a pair of boots that had seen more miles than most cars. She didn't know that the man who owned them, Razor, was about to wake to a call that started with sirens and ended with the words no father ever wants to hear: "Your daughter was in an accident." She only knew the rough rhythm of Eli's heartbeat under her cheek and the way his arms didn't let go, no matter how much they shook. The next car came out of nowhere. One moment the road ahead was empty, swallowed by darkness. The next, twin spears of light knifed over the rise, carving the night into harsh white and deeper shadow. Eli squinted, instinctively turning his body to shield Emily, presenting his back to the oncoming glare. His heart lurched. Maybe this one. He stepped a little closer to the centerline, raising his free arm, fingers splayed as wide as they could go. The engine's pitch rose. The lights grew harsher, flattening the world. For a second, he thought the car wasn't going to move at all. It was lined up perfectly with them, bearing down like this was the moment the night had been heading toward all along. His throat closed. At the last possible second, the car veered into the opposite lane, sweeping around them with a smooth, graceful curve. Wind tore at his hoodie, tugged Emily's hair into his face. He glimpsed the driver's profile, a flash of pale knuckles on the steering wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead, jaw clenched in a line that said nothing and everything at once. The car was gone before Eli could even think about shouting. Emily's fingers dug into his hoodie. "They don't see us," she whispered. "Why don't they see us?" "They see us," he said, each word a stone. "They just don't want to." Anger flickered in his chest, a small, hot coal under all the fear and exhaustion. Not the wild, lashing kind that got kids like him labeled "problem" in files and reports. This was different. Quieter. Heavier. "Should have left me," she mumbled suddenly. You could have gone." Too late, he said. You're stuck with me now. Her head shifted, the motion small but deliberate. You don't even know who I am, she said. He adjusted his grip, teeth grinding as a fresh bolt of pain shot through his shoulder. I know enough, he replied. What's that? Her voice was fading, drifting toward a place he was terrified she might not come back from. You're the girl I didn't walk away from, he said. She went quiet at that. The wind picked up, slicing across the open fields and slamming into them sideways. It slipped under his hoodie, found every patch of sweat, and turned it into ice. Eli's teeth started to chatter, not with fear, but with sheer cold and fatigue. He focused on details to keep his mind from unraveling. The rough texture of the road beneath his boots. The faint, metallic taste in his mouth. The uneven rhythm of Emily's breathing. The way the light ahead might have brightened by a fraction or might just be his hope playing tricks. He thought of the last place he'd slept. Under a bridge that hummed with passing traffic, concrete leaching the warmth out of his bones. He thought of the shelter intake worker who'd looked at his birth date and said, almost aged out, huh, like it was a sentence instead of a warning. He thought of every time he'd watched other people's kids being buckled into cars, handed snacks, wrapped in coats, while he pretended he didn't feel anything at all. Emily made a soft sound, pulling him back. Eli, she breathed. Yeah. If my dad finds you, her words tangled, tripping over each other. Don't freak out. A humorless huff escaped him. Why would I freak out, he asked. He's not like other dads, she said. People listen when he's mad. The way she said it sent a faint chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the wind. Sounds like someone who should be mad at this road, he said carefully. He will be, she murmured. He doesn't let people hurt me. Eli didn't answer. He thought of the cars that had swerved wide, the faces that had turned away, the drivers who pretended their music was more important than the child bleeding on the shoulder. He hoped, for the road's sake, that she was right about her father. His legs were shaking out right now, the tremors visible, his knees threatening mutiny with every step. The light ahead had grown, undeniably this time, resolving into the hazy outline of a tall sign and the low, squat shape of a building. Gas pumps glowed faint amber. A strip of fluorescent light cut across the darkness, harsh and artificial but so beautiful he almost laughed. Civilization. He was close enough to see the reflections of the pumps on the wet concrete. Close enough to make out a figure moving near the door, taking out trash or smoking a late-night cigarette. His heart thudded harder. Emily, he said quietly. You feel that? What? Her voice was a thread. Solid ground, he said. We're almost there. He stepped off the rough shoulder onto the cracked concrete of the forecourt. The shift felt like crossing some invisible line, out of nowhere and into somewhere. Light splashed over them, flattening shadows, turning the blood on his hoodie from dark patches to stark, ugly stains. The humming refrigerator units and the soft ding of an automatic doorbell folded into the night air. The man by the entrance froze, halfway through a drag of his cigarette. His eyes went wide. The trash bag slipped from his hand and hit the ground with a dull thump. What the? Eli's voice broke on the word he'd been carrying for miles. Help, he croaked. The man dropped the cigarette, grinding it out with his shoe as he stumbled forward. Inside the store, another head turned. A woman abandoned the counter, pushing through the door with a hand already reaching for something, a phone, a towel, anything. Her face shifted from annoyance to shock in less than a second. "Put her down," she shouted. Here, on the ground. Careful." Eli's arms protested at the very idea of letting go. They'd been locked in one position for so long that the thought of releasing her felt wrong, like betraying some silent deal he'd made with the universe. His knees buckled. The concrete rushed up. Hands were suddenly there, strangers' hands, warm and firm, guiding Emily away from his chest, sliding something under her head, pressing down on the worst of the bleeding. Voices overlapped above him, sharp and focused. "Call an ambulance. She's losing a lot. How far did you carry?" Someone touched his shoulder. He flinched, a flash of instinctive panic shooting through him. "Easy, kid," a voice said. "You're okay. You did good." He wanted to argue. He didn't feel okay. His arms felt hollow, his chest felt too tight, and the sudden absence of her weight made him dizzy, like the world had forgotten how heavy it was supposed to be. He stared at Emily. In the harsh gas station light, she looked smaller. Pale. Fragile in a way that scared him more than the blood. But there was a thin line of color in her cheeks now, a stubborn rise and fall in her chest that said her body hadn't surrendered yet. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, the sound threading through the night like a promise. He should have felt relief. Instead, a different fear crawled up his spine. Sirens meant uniforms. Uniforms meant questions. Questions meant everything he'd spent years outrunning might finally catch up. Eli pushed himself to sitting, his back hitting the base of the gas pump. His vision swam for a second, then settled. A man crouched in front of him, face etched with concern and confusion. "How far did you come?" the man asked. Eli tried to answer. The words didn't line up right in his head. Miles. Ditch. Road. Cars that didn't stop. None of it felt real now that the fluorescent hum wrapped around them like a cage. "It doesn't matter," he muttered. The sirens grew louder. Emergency lights flickered against the dark horizon, red and blue strobes splashing across the fields. The air changed, charged, tense, full of motion. Voices kept working over Emily, counting under their breath, checking, adjusting. "Stay right there," someone told him. "They'll want to look at you too." He heard it for what it was, an order wrapped in concern. The old instincts snapped awake. He'd brought her to the lights. He'd done the part no one else had been willing to do. Now the world was arriving in force, sirens and all, ready to take over, and take notice. He glanced at the open stretch of night just beyond the edge of the forecourt light. Shadows pooled under the sign. The road slid away into darkness, the same darkness he'd walked through to get here. Out there, nobody asked his name. Nobody wrote it down. Behind him, the ambulance's brakes hissed as it pulled in. Doors slammed. Boots hit concrete in fast, practiced rhythms. Commands snapped through the air. Male teen, possible shock. "Sir, sit down, please. Whose blood is?" Eli's heartbeat thumped harder, louder than the sirens. He looked once more at Emily. She lay on the concrete, surrounded by people who knew what to do, her life no longer balanced solely in his aching arms. For the first time since the crash, she wasn't alone with him in the dark. The knot in his chest loosened just enough to let something else in. He turned his head toward the road. The night waited, cold, indifferent, familiar. Without a word, while every eye was on the flashing lights and the bleeding girl, Eli pushed himself up on shaking legs. Pain flared through his shoulder and spine, but his body knew this movement too well: the sideways step, the slip into shadow, the art of being somewhere until the moment it became dangerous to be seen. The first paramedic reached Emily's side and never noticed the boy who'd carried her vanish from the edge of the circle of light. By the time anyone thought to ask where he was, the gas station forecourt held only the echo of his footsteps and a trail of drying blood heading back into the dark. Eli woke to the sound of his own teeth grinding. For a few long seconds, he didn't know where he was. Only that his whole body hurt in layers, like someone had stacked pain on pain and then wrapped it in cold. Concrete pressed against his back, leaching what little warmth he had left. Above him, something rumbled, a low, constant thunder that made the air vibrate in his chest. Cars, he realized slowly. Rolling across the overpass, tires whispering against asphalt he couldn't see. He blinked up at a ceiling of stained concrete, faintly lit by a sickly orange street lamp bleeding in from one side. His breath puffed out in short, uneven clouds he could almost see in the chilly air. Every inhale felt like it dragged broken glass through his lungs. He tried to move his fingers first. They twitched inside gloves that didn't belong to him, too big, the leather stiff but holding a trapped pocket of warmth around his hands. That confused him. He didn't own gloves. His brain lagged, then caught up: somebody must have put them on him after he went down. Memory slammed into him. Emily's weight in his arms. The gas station lights. Hands taking her from him, voices crowding the air. The wail of sirens growing closer, the flash of red and blue reflecting in puddles of oil. The moment he realized he wasn't needed anymore, that the professionals had her, and the familiar panic that came with uniforms and questions. He remembered slipping sideways, away from the light, while everyone looked at the girl on the concrete instead of the boy who had carried her there. He remembered walking. He didn't remember stopping. Now he lay under a bridge, the overpass humming above him like a restless beast, the city's distant glow painting the edges of the world in dirty gold. Someone had draped a heavy jacket over him, thick, lined, the kind of coat people bought when they expected to see winter through, not outrun it. The kindness made his skin crawl. People didn't give you things without wanting something back. Not in his experience. He pushed himself upright with stiff, jerky movements. Muscles protested, trembling in waves. His back felt like a single, solid bruise from neck to waist. His shoulders burned. His arms, freed from Emily's weight, ached with phantom pressure, as if they still remembered the shape of her there. "She's alive," he whispered, voice rough and small in the echoing space. Saying it out loud made it more real than the memory. He clung to that instead of the fear that gnawed in the corners of his mind. They'd reached the lights. She'd had hands with training and gloves and tools hovering over her. Machines. Oxygen. Everything he'd never had. That had to count for something. He dragged his knees up, planting his boots on the damp ground. The concrete under the bridge was slick with old rain and oil, dark patches blooming like old wounds. Water dripped steadily from somewhere above, the slow, tired rhythm counting out seconds he didn't remember asking for. He shoved the borrowed jacket tighter around himself in spite of his suspicion. The weight settled over his ribs, heavier than anything he owned. He hated how good it felt. Hated that warmth could feel like a trap. The rumble of traffic ebbed and flowed overhead. Down here, the world was smaller, just pillars and shadows and the faint glow of city lights leaking in at the edges. It felt like a pocket reality where time slowed down enough for his body to tally the bill for what he'd done. He reached up, fingers tracing the line of his shoulder. The fall on the road had left a deep, throbbing ache under the skin. Every time he shifted, little needles of pain stabbed down into his chest and up into his neck. His lower back throbbed in a dull, grinding way that waited for him to make a wrong move. "You did this to yourself," he muttered. The words didn't sound accusing. Just tired. Factual. He leaned his head back against the cold pillar and closed his eyes, just for a second. Emily's face floated up again. The way her eyes had locked onto his when she'd first seen him in the ditch. The way her fingers had clung to his hoodie, as if letting go would drop her into some bottomless pit. The way she'd said his name at the gas station, even as strangers rushed in and he disappeared into the edges. He'd meant to leave quietly. He hadn't meant to collapse under a bridge like a broken thing somebody had forgotten to throw away. A sound cut through the hum of traffic. At first, he thought it was just another car overhead, engine notes slightly different. But the rumble grew, thickening, rolling along the underside of the bridge in a way that felt heavier, more deliberate. Not a car. A motorcycle. The engine came closer, low and controlled, not the high, whining scream of someone showing off. This was the slow, steady growl of a rider who knew exactly where they were going and why. Eli's eyes snapped open. His heart rate kicked up, blood thudding in his ears. Instinct screamed at him to flatten himself against the concrete, to fold into shadow until he became part of the bridge. He stayed where he was. Running hurt too much. The motorcycle's headlight washed weakly into the space under the overpass, cutting a pale arc through the gloom. The bike rolled to a stop just beyond the cone of the street lamp's reach. The engine idled for a moment, a low, living vibration. Then it cut off. Silence hit harder than the noise had. A figure swung a leg off the bike and straightened. From where Eli sat, the man was more outline than detail. Broad shoulders under leather. Helmet dangling from one hand. Boots that made soft, confident sounds against the concrete. He didn't come all the way into the light, staying just at the blurred edge where everything was half shadow. "You need help." The man's voice carried easily under the bridge, deep and calm. No bark. No official stiffness. That didn't make Eli feel any safer. "I'm good," Eli said. His own voice betrayed him, shaking around the edges, thinner than he wanted it to be. "Doesn't look that way from here," the man replied. He didn't move closer. Didn't hold out his hands like someone approaching a stray dog. He just stood there, giving Eli space, like he understood what it meant to be cornered. "You at the shelter?" Eli asked. "No." "Cops?" The word came out sharper than he intended. "No." "Social?" That one tasted like rust and old paperwork. The man shook his head once. No. Then why are you here? Eli asked. His fingers curled into the jacket without thinking. People don't just show up under bridges. Sometimes they do, the man said. When they're looking for someone. Eli's stomach clenched. Lots of people under bridges, he muttered. You got the wrong one. The man paused. You carried a girl a long way tonight, he said. From a wreck on the highway to a gas station with enough light for the ambulance to see what they were doing. Eli's jaw locked so hard it hurt. Who told you that? He demanded. Does it matter? The man asked quietly. Yeah, Eli said. It does. The man shifted his helmet to his other hand. Her father, he said. And some people who listen when he talks. The bridge felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Eli's mind raced. Emily's dad. He pictured a man in a suit, maybe. Or someone in a trucker cap and work boots who yelled a lot. He didn't picture bikers. Not yet. For Eli, fathers were mostly imaginary creatures, half threat, half fantasy, rarely present. What do they want? He asked, a brittle edge creeping into his tone. To thank me. To ask why I ran. To hand me over. The man's jaw flexed once. They want you alive, he said. That's a start. That's not an answer, Eli shot back. No, the man agreed. It's not. They stared at each other across the dim space, the weight of the night pressing down around them. She alive? Eli asked suddenly. The question ripped out of him before he could stop it. It felt like the ground beneath everything else. Yes, the man said. The single word landed like a stone in his chest, dislodging a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The world blurred for a second. He blinked hard, refusing to let anything spill over. You sure? He asked. She's in a hospital bed, the man said. Hooked up to more machines than you'd like. But breathing. Talking, when they let her. Eli's shoulders sagged back against the pillar. He didn't realize how close he'd been to folding until the threat of it passed. Then you don't need me, he said, voice scraped raw. You got what you came for. You think that's why I'm here? The man asked. Eli lifted his chin, meeting the shadowed gaze. Why else? He said. Girl's safe now. You can tell her dad the kid disappeared. That's what kids like me do. We disappear. A long beat passed. You didn't disappear when it counted, the man said. Something hot and sharp flickered in Eli's chest at that, too close to hope for comfort. What does he want from me? Eli asked. Her father. To know your name, the man said. For starters. That's not a good idea, Eli muttered. Names get written down. Files get opened. People start deciding things. Your name's already written somewhere, the man replied. This isn't about that. Then what? Eli pushed. You here to drag me in front of him so he can say thanks and then forget I exist? Is that what you'd prefer? The man asked. Eli's laugh came out hollow. Doesn't matter what I prefer, he said. It never has. The man took one slow step closer. Not enough to crowd, just enough that Eli could see more of his face. The lines around his eyes. The way he looked at Eli like he was cataloging damage and potential at the same time. "What's your name?" he asked. Eli opened his mouth to lie. To say something forgettable. To give a name that wouldn't lead anywhere. But Emily's face flashed in his mind again. Her fingers digging into his hoodie. Her voice, rasping his name at the gas station. "Eli," he said quietly. The man nodded once, like that confirmed something. "I ride with Razor," he said. "He's Emily's father." The name landed like a physical thing. Eli's mind grabbed onto the only part that mattered. "You telling me her dad's some biker?" he asked. "I'm telling you her dad is not a man who lets things slide," the writer said. "Especially not when they involve his kid." Eli swallowed. "Is he angry?" The word tasted stupid the moment it left his mouth. Of course he was angry. His daughter had been broken on a highway. "At the road," the man said. "At the ones who drove past. At the world that made a kid like you the only person who stopped." He let that sink in before continuing. "And at himself. For not being there." Eli looked away, staring into the deep shadow between the pillars. "He doesn't know me," he said. "He knows enough," the man replied. "He knows you didn't walk away." Wind hissed through the underpass, carrying the faint smell of exhaust and wet concrete. "Why isn't he here?" Eli asked suddenly. "If he's so, whatever. Why send you?" "Emily needs him at the hospital right now," the writer said. "She keeps asking if they've found you yet. It makes it hard to leave." That image hit Eli harder than he expected. Emily, pale and bruised in a hospital bed, refusing to settle because some stray kid hadn't been accounted for. "She shouldn't worry about me," he muttered. "Too late," the man said. "She already decided you matter." Eli's chest tightened. He didn't know what to do with that. More engines rumbled faintly in the distance. Not overhead this time. Somewhere beyond the mouth of the underpass. Low, rough, layered. Not one bike. More than one. "You hear that?" the man asked. Eli did. The sound rolled under his skin, familiar from a lifetime of staying away from places people with patched jackets gathered. Bikers were trouble in every story he'd ever heard. Trouble, danger, or the punchline to someone else's joke. "Yeah," he said. "They're with me," the writer added. "Spread out, looking in all the places kids go when they don't have anywhere to go." Eli's muscles tensed. "You hunting me?" he asked. "We're trying to keep you from freezing to death under a bridge," the man said. "What happens after that is your call." "Doesn't feel like it," Eli said. The writer reached into his jacket slowly. Every nerve in Eli's body went on alert. His hands curled into fists inside the borrowed gloves, breath hitching. The man pulled out another pair of gloves. Thinner. Worn. He crouched down, set them on the ground between them like an offering, then straightened again. "Somebody left the others on you while you were out," he said. "These are just extra. You take them, or you don't. You walk, or you stay. No one drags you anywhere tonight." Eli stared at the gloves. The simple, stupid gesture twisted something in his chest. Why? He asked, voice low. Because a girl is breathing right now who shouldn't be, the rider said. And the only reason she is sitting under this bridge, pretending he doesn't deserve help. Eli's throat worked. You don't know what happens when people start helping me, he said. Maybe not, the man said. But I've seen what happens when they don't. The engines were closer now. Their growl bounced off the concrete, turning the air heavy, filling the underpass with vibration. Headlights flared at both ends of the space, white beams chopping through the dark. Eli's survival instinct screamed. Run. Melt into the shadows. Slip between pillars. Vanish into the city the way he always had when things got big and loud and dangerous. He pushed his back harder against the pillar instead, breathing shallow, heart hammering. The first bike rolled into the light, engine rumbling low. The rider's vest caught the weak street lamp glow, patches dark but unmistakable. Another bike slid in from the opposite side, headlight cutting across Eli's face for a brief, blinding second. The underpass was filling up. Leather. Steel. The heavy, specific silence of men who knew how to handle violence and didn't need to talk about it. The rider who'd found him didn't move away. Didn't step aside. He just shifted his stance, subtly angling his body between Eli and the growing circle of bikes, as if drawing a line no one else could see. Eli, he said quietly, without looking back. You can walk deeper into the dark right now, and you're right, these guys will have a hard time tracking you in this city. Engines idled, heat and exhaust rolling through the air. Or. Eli managed. Or you stand up, the man said. You let Razor look you in the eyes and decide what he owes you for carrying his daughter when the rest of the world drove past. Eli's pulse thundered. He looked from the wall of bikes to the path of shadow curling away behind the pillars, the escape route he'd taken 100 times in 100 different places. His body leaned one way. His heart leaned another. At the far end of the underpass, another engine joined the chorus. Deeper. Louder. The kind of sound that made other riders instinctively shift. The bikes parted, just a little, like a tide making room for something bigger. Headlight slicing through the dark, a single motorcycle rolled into the center of the space, its rider tall in the saddle, shoulders set, presence heavy enough to bend the air around him. The bike came to a stop. The engine cut. Silence crashed down, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the distant roar of unseen traffic. The rider swung a leg over and stood. He took off his helmet. And even from the shadows, Eli could feel it. The moment the night shifted around this man, around the quiet storm in his eyes. Razor had arrived. Razor didn't rush the silence. He stood there in the middle of the underpass, helmet in one hand, the other hanging loose by his side. The bikes around him idled down to a low, restless murmur, engines ticking as they cooled. Headlights threw long, warped shadows up the concrete pillars, turning the space into a flickering cave of chrome and leather and waiting eyes. He saw Eli almost immediately. The boy was half-folded against a pillar, the wrong size jacket swallowing his frame, gloved hands pressed into the concrete like he needed it to remember which way was up. Even from here, Razor could see the tremor in his arms, the stubborn set of his jaw, and the exhaustion clinging to him like a second skin. Stories like this are just the beginning. If you felt it with every twist, commit by subscribing so you won't miss what's next. Because for kids like Eli and fathers like Razor, one night on a broken road can change everything that comes after. Razor started walking. His boots made soft, measured sounds against the concrete, each step deliberate. The men on the bikes watched without moving, the air around them thick with a tension that wasn't aimed at Eli, but wrapped around him all the same. They'd heard the story. They knew why they were here. And most of them had already decided something about this kid before Razor said a word. Eli's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd seen men like this before, from a distance, mostly. Outside bars he wasn't allowed in, at the edges of lots where he kept his head down and his hands in his pockets. They were the kind of men adults pointed at and whispered about, the kind of men police watched, the kind of men kids like him were told to avoid if they wanted to stay safe. But none of those men had ever had a daughter named Emily. Razor stopped a few feet away, close enough for Eli to see his face clearly now. Short hair flecked with gray that looked earned, not aged. A jaw that could have been carved from stone. Eyes like a storm held on a tight leash, quiet, controlled, but full of something dangerous and deep. For a moment, they just looked at each other. "You're Eli," Razor said at last. It wasn't a question. Eli swallowed, throat dry. "Yeah," he said, voice low. "I guess I am." Razor's gaze traveled over him slowly. The pale skin under the bruises. The way he held his shoulder a fraction too stiff. The dirt ground into the knees of his jeans, the dried blood on his hoodie that wasn't his. "How bad does it hurt?" Razor asked. Eli blinked, thrown off. "What?" "Your back." "Your shoulder," Razor said. "How bad?" Eli's instinct was to shrug it off, to bite down on the truth until it snapped. "Doesn't matter," he muttered. Razor's jaw flexed once. "It matters to me," he said. The words hit Eli in a place that had been empty for a long time. He looked away, focusing on a crack in the concrete near his boot. "I've had worse," he said. "Not what I asked," Razor replied. Their eyes met again. For a moment, Eli almost said it, the real answer, the one that tasted like fire and ice and broken glass. Instead, he let out a breath that shook more than he wanted it to. "Feels like I got run over," he admitted. Then backed over. "Twice." Razor nodded once. A muscle jumped in his cheek. "Good," he said. Eli stared at him. "Good?" "Means you still feel it," Razor said. "Means your body hasn't given up yet." He took another small step closer. "You carried my daughter," Razor said. "Through the dark. Through cars that wouldn't stop. Through a pain that would have put grown men on their knees." Eli flinched, the memory of the road flashing through him. Headlights, horns, the cold bite of air in his lungs, Emily's fingers clutching at his hoodie like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. "I didn't have a lot of options," he said quietly. "You had one," Razor said. "Walk away." "You didn't." He let that sit between them. Eli shifted, uncomfortable under the weight of the words. "Didn't feel like a choice," he muttered. Razor's eyes softened, just a shade. "That's the funny thing about real choices," he said. "Half the time, you don't realize you're making them. Not until everything after starts changing." Traffic thundered overhead, distant and indifferent. Emily, Eli said suddenly. You said she's okay. Razor's gaze flicked toward him, sharper again. They say she's lucky, he said. Lucky the car didn't roll. Lucky the fire didn't start. Lucky someone got her out before the fuel hit the wrong heat. Lucky someone kept her awake when her body wanted to shut down. Lucky someone got her to a place with light when the medics finally showed up. He stepped in until they were only a few feet apart, close enough for Eli to see the small smear of dried blood at the cuff of Razor's jacket, Emily's, probably, transferred in some desperate moment at the hospital. I don't believe in luck, Razor finished. Eli's chest tightened. He didn't know what to do with the look on Razor's face. It wasn't gratitude, not exactly. Gratitude was too small, too polite a word. This was something heavier. Something that vibrated in the air like a cord pulled too tight. What do you believe in? Eli asked, voice barely above a whisper. Debts, Razor said. And what a man does when somebody saves what he can't live without. He glanced once at the riders around them, then back at Eli. There are a lot of people in that hospital, Razor said. Doctors. Nurses. Medics. They all did their jobs. I'm grateful for that. He took a breath. But when my girl tells me she was lying on the side of a dead road, bleeding and alone, and some kid picked her up and refused to put her down while the rest of the world drove past. His voice dropped, a quiet, dangerous thing. That's not a job, he said. That's a choice. Eli's throat burned. He wanted to say it hadn't been that heroic. That he'd been scared out of his mind. That his first instinct had been to run the other way. That if she'd screamed louder, maybe someone better would have stopped and he could have stayed invisible. But none of that changed the way Razor was looking at him. You don't owe me anything, Eli said quickly, almost tripping over the words. I just didn't want her to die there. Razor held his gaze. That's where you're wrong, he said. The underpass went very still. Eli's heartbeat jumped. I owe you more than I can ever pay, Razor continued. And I don't intend to pretend otherwise. The words felt unreal, like they belonged to someone else's story. Eli had spent his life being the one who owed time, obedience, silence, gratitude for scraps. He didn't know how to wear a debt like this. It sat on him awkwardly, like the jacket, like the gloves, too big, too heavy, too much. You don't even know me, he said. Razor's eyes didn't waver. I know enough, he said. I know you're the one person who didn't look away from my kid. The engines around them idled, a low, rumbling chorus. Men who'd come ready to search and fight were listening instead, eyes flicking between Razor and the boy under the bridge. What happens now? Eli asked. He wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Razor's jaw flexed once. His gaze slid past Eli for a moment, taking in the shadows behind him, the damp concrete, the small, folded shape the boy had been when he first saw him. Now. Razor said. Now we stop you from freezing to death under a bridge after saving my daughter's life. He took a slow breath. After that, he added, we see what you want instead of what the world keeps deciding for you. Eli shook his head, a short, jerky motion. It doesn't work like that, he said. People like you You say things, and then someone else shows up with forms and conditions and rules. I've done that dance. It always ends the same way. Me on the street again. Razor's mouth pulled into something that wasn't quite a smile. I don't do forms, he said. I do promises. Promises. The word hung in the air, unfamiliar and heavy. You can't just take me, Eli said. Razor nodded. Wasn't planning to, he said. You're not a stray dog. You're not a lost wallet. You're a kid who made a call when it mattered, and I'm not about to repay that by turning you into a project. He glanced at the jacket on Eli's shoulders. You cold? He asked. Eli almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. He was cold in ways a jacket couldn't touch. A little, he said instead. Razor jerked his chin toward one of the bikes. Truck's parked up top, he said. Heater works. Seat reclines. It doesn't ask you questions about your past. It just gets you to the hospital without your legs giving out. Eli's breath caught. Hospital, he echoed. Emily's been asking about you, Razor said. She doesn't know we found you yet. She thinks you walked into the dark and dropped off the edge of the world like everything else that ever tried to help her. He paused. I don't like my kid thinking that's how it goes, he said quietly. The idea of walking into a hospital, of corridors and machines and white coats and eyes that measured instead of saw, made Eli's skin crawl. He could almost hear the echo of the fluorescent hum, smell the antiseptic and burnt coffee of waiting rooms where decisions were made about children like him. They'll ask questions, he said. They'll want to know who I am. Where I'm from. Why I was on that road. Razor nodded. They might, he said. But you're coming in with me. And there's a limit to how hard people push when a room's full of leather and engines are running outside. He let that picture form. Doctors with their charts, glancing at the doorway where Razor's shadow fell, nurses aware of the line between curiosity and trouble. You can walk away after you see her, Razor added. If that's still what you want. Eli stared at him. You'd let me just leave, he asked. Razor's eyes didn't flinch. Eli, he said. You already walked into hell once tonight for my girl. If you decide to walk back into the dark after you've seen she made it out, I'm not going to tackle you in a hospital hallway. His voice hardened slightly. But I'm not going to pretend I won't come looking later. Because that's my choice. The honesty of it stunned Eli more than any promise could have. He looked down at his hands, at the gloves that weren't his, at the jacket that smelled faintly of exhaust and something like pine. No one had ever put this much effort into what he chose. He thought about the bridge, the cold, the way the world had always been, a series of exits and edges and places to disappear. He thought about Emily's fingers in his hoodie, the way she'd said his name like it meant safety instead of trouble. He thought about a hospital bed somewhere in the city, a girl staring at a too bright ceiling, waiting for someone who might not come. His legs felt like they were filled with sand when he pushed himself away from the pillar. Pain screamed through his back and shoulder, but he stayed upright. The circle of bikes watched, engines purring like low, approving growls. Razor didn't reach for him. He just stepped back half a pace, giving Eli a clear path to stand beside him or step away into the dark. Concrete. Shadow. Chrome. The options stretched like two roads. I don't know how to do this, Eli said quietly. Good, Razor murmured. Means you're not faking it. He tilted his head toward the ramp that led up out of the underpass. Come on, he said. Let's go prove to my daughter that the world doesn't always walk away. Eli's boots felt heavy as he took the first step. Each rise of the ramp pulled fresh protests from his battered muscles. Each pool of light they passed under made him want to flinch, to duck back into shadow. But Razor walked beside him, not too close, not too far, a steady presence in his peripheral vision. At the top, the night opened wider, city lights scattering across the horizon, traffic streaming by in streaks of white and red. A dark truck sat a little apart from the rest, its engine idling softly, breath steaming in the cold air. Razor opened the passenger door. Warmth rolled out, smelling faintly of old leather and coffee. Eli hesitated at the edge, one hand on the frame, the other hovering over the seat like crossing that threshold would change something he could never change back. Last chance to bolt, Razor said. No threat. No challenge. Just fact. Eli thought of the bridge behind him, the echo of his own heartbeat in the dark. He thought of the road, the ditch, the way the world had looked when he thought Emily might die in his arms. He thought of her father, who could have stayed at the hospital and called it enough, but was standing here instead, holding open a door. He climbed in. The seat creaked softly under his weight. The warmth seeped into his bones, startling and almost painful. He didn't realize how cold he'd been until his body started to remember another way to feel. Razor closed the door with a solid thunk and walked around the front. Eli watched him slide into the driver's seat, watched his hands settle on the wheel, watched the way his eyes flicked once to him, checking, before turning toward the road. The bikes around them shifted into formation without a word, engines revving low. Razor eased the truck into gear. As they pulled away from the underpass, the bridge shrank in the rearview mirror, a dark mouth swallowing its secrets. The city rose ahead, lights sharp against the night, a maze of streets and choices Eli had never believed were his to make. He leaned his head back against the seat, eyes burning. He had walked through the night carrying a girl he didn't know, on a road that didn't care if either of them made it out. He had expected, at best, to vanish again once she was safe, to become a footnote in someone else's story. Instead, he was riding toward a hospital where a girl named Emily was waiting for proof that he existed. Beside him, a man named Razor drove like he'd decided that, for once, the world didn't get to swallow a kid who'd done the right thing. Engines rumbled around them, a low, protective growl. For the first time in a long time, Eli wasn't walking alone into the dark. He was being carried, whether he liked it or not, toward a future that had room for his name.